Hello and welcome to episode 8 of the Note to File podcast, a collection of interviews, best practices, and candid commentary for clinical research sites. I'm your host, Brad Hightower. Make sure to check us out at notetofilepodcast.com. Today on the show, we have John Bowman. He is a 2017 graduate from Washington and Lee University with a BS in biology. He's currently working as a clinical research coordinator in Charleston, South Carolina. And his goal is to become an MD with a focus on clinical trials as well as conventional medicine. Today on the podcast, we talk about the nuances of working with pediatric populations versus older populations, the importance of preparation, as well as the importance of building trust with patients. So enjoy, John Bowman. All right, John Bowman, thank you. Welcome, and appreciate you coming on, man.
No, thanks for having me. I'm very excited for it.
Yeah. It's again, we're still, pretty new. I love talking to, coordinators from all over the place. It's been very informative so far. And again, thank you for coming on. And curious to tell me a little bit about how you got into clinical research. It looks like you were you a surgical rep before you started clinical trials?
So yeah, the ultimate goal kind of for what I want to do is to become a surgeon. That's kind of what I wanted to do since I was a kid. But once I graduated college, I wanted to take a year or two off, save some money, get some experience before I jump back into school. So I kind of just fell into the field. I originally worked at a spine surgery center in Baltimore, where I was a medical assistant part-time during the week, research coordinator the other days, and then I worked evenings in the OR as a surgical rep for one of the spine instrumentation companies there, which was really, really cool. I got to see a lot of different aspects of patient care, not only just, clinical treatment, but also kind of dabble in the research side of it. Now we were just self-sponsored. We weren't doing, full-blown clinical trials at that point, but it kind of let me dip my toes in the field and kind of see what research was all about.
Yeah, that's I've never really considered that option before. I mean, you got every angle there from clinical side with the MA, and then the research side, and then really being able to be in there during procedures to see how the sausage is made, if you will.
Yeah, no, exactly. Which, like I said, the goal is eventually medical school and to become a surgeon. So kind of seeing all aspects was really nice, not only for, obviously trying to build my application, my resume for applying, but just to make sure that is something I wanted to do and kind of see the lifestyle aspect of it as well.
Yeah, that's super important. And I think that's a really smart idea is, we all sometimes have these predetermined notions of what it is to be something, what it is to be a surgeon. But if you can get in there and really see how it works and what their lives are like, then certainly that can save you a lot of time and money down the road, keep you from pursuing something that you're like, well, wait a minute, actually this kind of sucks. I wish I hadn't have done this. So at least you had the foresight to get in there and really, get your hands in it and see what it was like. So that's a really smart move. I like that.
Yeah, and it was something I really enjoyed. I went into it knowing it was kind of a 1-year gig. I was through a alumni of where I went to school, which was really nice. And then, so once that year was up, I started looking for, other opportunities. And I ended up finding a clinical research coordinator position down here in Charleston. So I moved and started getting into that. And honestly, when I first got the job, I had absolutely no idea what the position entailed. When they were interviewing me, I was asking, oh, well, did we get to write papers? And, how do we manage the data and all that stuff? Because I was still thinking about it from the, self-sponsored aspect of more kind of local, if you will, research.
Sure.
But they were really helpful, and I was able to learn quite a bit there, which was really nice. It was in a pediatric practice, so I still got to see some of the clinical treatment side, as well as then dive way more into the pharmaceutical research side of it as well.
Sure. No, and that's sort of instructive to me, because I think it's, you say you work in clinical research or work in clinical trials. I think I would say even the majority of people you tell that to have no idea what that means. That's, some people think, I tell them that I, work in a lab and look in a microscope all day. I usually have to just say, you ever see those commercials on TV that they're looking for people to try a new medication? That's what I do. So yeah, it's interesting to hear, coming in from that side, and even someone who was, you were connected with, the clinical aspects and still not have that full understanding of what it is to be a clinical research coordinator.
Sure. Yeah, no, honestly, that's probably a pretty good way of explaining it, because I always try to do the same thing too. Oh, I try to do research on new drugs or new treatments coming out, but it ends up, that actually might be the best way of explaining it.
So yeah, so you started in at doing pediatrics.
Yeah, which was cool. I'd never worked with kids before. Coming from a spine surgery center, we tend to deal with older folk, just since that's who has spine problems, back problems, which was interesting. But then, going straight from dealing with 60 to 90-year-olds to dealing with 2-month-old to 2-week preemies,
Right.
it was kind of a shock, which was cool. It was just a whole different experience, a different atmosphere. More fun, honestly. Kids are happy people, so that was fun being able to work with them.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I feel I haven't done a lot of peds. I did a peds migraine study, but for some reason, just the idea of pediatric research is a little intimidating to me. I don't know why. For some reason, I feel just more of a sense of responsibility to, if you're working with children. So again, I applaud you for that. And it seems like most people I know start kind of the other way around, dealing with, adolescent and adult, and then, move over to pediatrics. So that's a sort of interesting, you've had a very interesting career path, I find. That's
it's been fun. And honestly, you were kind of speaking to feeling more responsibility for the trials. That was kind of the biggest hurdle for them, was the recruitment aspect of it. Once a child was in it and their family, had experience with the trials and with the staff, they were almost always very happy to do many more trials, as long as they were eligible. But convincing them, especially a first time parent, you're talking to them at their baby's first checkup in the clinic, saying, hey, we have this vaccine trial coming up when your baby's 2 months old. Would you be interested in? To them, they maybe hadn't even thought of if they were going to vaccinate. So that was kind of the biggest hurdle, was just convincing them that what we were doing was, as safe as we could make it, and explaining the risks and the benefits, and trying to get them on board with kind of expanding the medical knowledge out there.
Yeah, no, I could see that being particularly challenging when, you're still figuring out just how to have a kid and then being approached with the idea of putting them, through a trial. So that's always been an interesting area to me. So again, I just find this an interesting way to start. I don't know that I've seen that. It's very cool. So where does that put you now? What are kind of studies and what kind of populations are you dealing with right now?
Sure. So I ended up getting a new position at a different company, Coastal Carolina Research, down here in Charleston, back at the end of December. So kind of right when the year was flipping over. And we work mostly with adults and adolescents, doing kind of everything. It's a lot of migraine, vaccine, different treatments, dermatological disorders, just kind of a lot of different disease states, which, coming from peds, was nice. Pediatrics was very cool and interesting, but it was also just a lot of vaccines and a lot of vaccines. Sure. And a lot of vaccines, just because it is, kind of a vulnerable population. But being able to work with adults and healthy volunteers and testing out a lot of different medications is pretty cool, because you're not only able to interact with a different population age-wise, but also learn a lot more about the different diseases that you're trying to treat. Yeah,
I know. It sounds like it's a lot less homogenous as far as the types of trials. So, and I know that so you guys are multi-therapeutic. I mean, I've definitely heard of Coastal Carolina Research Center. It sounds like you guys are a relatively large institution. Is that fair to say?
I would think so. I don't have too much experience with how big research companies can get, but I'd say we're a decently sized company, able to handle a pretty large number of trials.
As far as your role there, or do you get sort of the broad range of experience, or are you a little more specialized in your guys' roles there?
A little bit of both. It kind of depends on what's going on with the trials and how many we have going on. With COVID kind of, slowing everything down, I'm sure for everyone, we weren't bringing in any new patients, kind of put screenings on hold, and I was just working with the healthy patients that we had just to try to reduce risk for everyone. But we were able to work on recruitment a little bit more, able to call some more patients, get those screening visits set up for, a few weeks or months out, work on some archiving and regulatory work, which I do like seeing patients the most. That's probably the most fulfilling part of the job for me. But I also
Absolutely.
have a decent bit of OCD, so being able to kind of go through old files and studies and get them filed and archived correctly has been pretty satisfying too, to fill in the downtime.
Sure. No, and that's a good point too. As this is a great opportunity to broaden your skill set. If you're at a site that's on limited availability to see patients, it's a really good time to either learn a new skill or hone the skills that maybe you don't normally use otherwise. I'm kind of in the same boat. I prefer the interpersonal relationship building and seeing the patients, and but I hate paperwork. I am the opposite of OCD. So I do not relish in having to get everything cleaned up and
sure
and deal
dot
with
the I's
that.
and cross the T's.
Exactly. So it kills me to not be able to get patients in and have those informed consent process discussions, and
Sure.
so that it's been but again I think it's a fair point that you can find some opportunity in the downtime to again either learn a new skill or hone the skills that you already have that maybe you're not maybe it's not your strength. So that's a good point. So let's say you're looking at what, about 3 years now of being a research coordinator?
Yeah, just about two of full-time clinical trials research as we do now, and then a year just kind of getting into it and getting more patient research experience.
Sure. So I know that, like, for myself, it took me a good year to really understand and kind of have my arms around the clinical trial process. And a lot of that probably speaks to the way I was trained and the environment that I started in. So just
Sure.
sort of subjectively, how do you feel in where you're at in your career and your understanding of the full breadth of the clinical trial process?
Kind of depends. When I was finishing up my I guess year and a half at the pediatric practice, I felt very comfortable with pediatric trials, at least the ones we were doing.
Sure.
We've been doing many of them for that year and a half, and I felt comfortable with the protocols and how all of that worked. And then as soon as I got to Coastal Carolina Research here, it was a whole different ballgame. A lot higher throughput just because the patient population is a little bit broader. A lot of different indications and a lot of different sponsors that I hadn't worked with, and that was kind of the biggest loop, I think, was that each sponsor does things just different enough that even if you know how to do it in general, you still have to kind of relearn it just for that sponsor. So
yeah.
I feel comfortable where I'm at, but I definitely know that there's a lot that I don't know.
Right. Yeah. I think that's, again, perfectly put, that I spent a lot of time not knowing what I didn't know. That's, again, I love that way of putting it. But you're right. I mean, it's just when you think you've got it kind of nailed down, another sponsor or study comes along that you're like, well, nope, this is a little bit just different enough to where, you've got to really stay on your toes. But truthfully, I mean, for me, that's what's attracted me to the industry, is that you're never going to be doing the same thing the same way. It's not like working on a factory line where it's, doing the same job over and over again every day.
Yeah, no, I would totally agree.
So there's a lot of value and beauty in that. So that's what, again, has attracted me to it. So it's good to hear that, you putting yourself in those different positions is helping you grow as a clinical research coordinator. And even beyond that, and more importantly than that, as you pursue becoming an MD, you're going to have a huge leg up. Most, I work with surgeons and they don't know anything about what I do. They think that a patient shows up for surgery and that's just what happened. That's all there was to it. And then they're the man, and it's their that's their patient now.
Sure, it's their show to
right,
run.
exactly. They don't realize what goes on in the background and everything leading up to that point. So that's going to put you in a very, advantageous position to understand and very likely have your own, nice revenue stream doing clinical research and being able to incorporate that just because you have that knowledge. So I think you're taking a really, whether it's purposeful or not, it seems like you're taking a very purposeful approach. So I applaud that. I think that's awesome, and it's going to pay off for you in the long run. I can almost guarantee it.
Well, thanks. And I definitely hope so. Clinical trials definitely wasn't something I, going through college knew much about or had planned on incorporating into my practice in the future. But now that I've been in it for a few years, it's very much grown on me, and it's definitely something that I want to incorporate and want to have be a main part of my practice moving forward. Not only the revenue stream that is nice, and obviously everyone's got to make a living, but it's also pretty neat to be on the cutting edge of what's coming out there, especially different treatments and different ways of thinking about how to tackle a disease.
Sure.
Whether that's through different pathways or a different technique or different instrumentation, whatever it might be. It's pretty cool to kind of broaden your horizons in that aspect and hopefully be able to provide the best care for the patients. Because at the end of the day, that's what both clinical treatment and clinical trials are about, is getting the most effective, least disadvantageous treatment out there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a win-win situation. As long as you're running things right and doing, providing
Sure.
high quality, it's obviously a great benefit to your patients. It's a great benefit to your practice, and it is a revenue stream. And again, that's I sometimes, I sometimes promote that part first, even though it really is maybe the least important thing. We're
Sure.
doing this because we are helping to advance scientific discovery and to help patients. There's nothing more fulfilling than, actually seeing you change a patient's life by including them in a clinical trial. It's
Sure.
It's an amazing thing, and it's something that we're lucky to be a part of. So I guess throughout your 2 or 3 years here, what are some best practices you've picked up, or some things that you would share with the community?
So I would say preparation as much as possible and as far ahead as possible, not only for just getting, a clinical trial up and running just in the startup phase. It's always nice to be, one of the first sites with the first patient, first visit, and get that under your belt and kind of rock and roll right out of the gate. But also just for the patient's comfort and the patient's experience with clinical trials, looking at their pre-screens ahead of time, giving them a call if you have a question, just so they don't make a drive in, whether it's only 5 minutes or an hour to be turned away because they didn't qualify. Have the lab work prepped and the EKG machine ready and all the questionnaires ready, and how you're going to fit that all in the scope of a visit. What order, when does the PI need to be there, when does the sub-I need to be there, whoever's seeing them, when does lab work, what other patients are there, and what timing are they going to have, so that way you don't have a patient show up and you go through the consenting process, which is going to be their first impression, which is obviously the most important, and that generally goes well. But that can only take you so far. If the consenting process goes great, that's 30 minutes or so, depending on the consent and the study. But they're there for potentially 2 hours, if not longer, depending on what the visit is. And if they're sitting around for an hour of that, not having anything, no labs being drawn, no questionnaires, no contact, just kind of sitting in a room, doesn't leave the best impression, especially if they think it's unorganized or just kind of a jumble on the site's end.
Yeah, and again, that's a very astute observation. I think the more I think about it, the longer I go, I start to consider that what we do is very much rooted in customer service. You want to create that experience for your patients so that they want to come back, so that you can retain them in your trial, so that, as you grow more trust with them, they'll share more with you. Maybe you can capture AEs or side effects that they may not have otherwise shared with you if you hadn't, provided that experience for them. So I think that's great that you're you have that foresight to recognize how important that is. Because I mean, and I've been guilty of it. I've been guilty of just trying to pump through a visit. And look, sometimes we all have to sit and wait for a PI to show up. It can be,
oh, sure.
It can be sometimes out of our hands, but as much as you can mitigate, those exterior factors, then the better the experience is going to be for the patient.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point there. I hadn't really thought about too deeply, is that our responsibility is, one, to make sure the patient's healthy, but two is to provide good, high quality data for the sponsor. That's the whole point of the trial, is to get that data and see how well the IP works. So if you're right, if the patient trusts you more and you build a good rapport with them, they're much more likely to give you honest answers or let you know about some stuff that they might have been too embarrassed to mention otherwise.
Yeah, and I can't tell you how many times in early part of my career I would sit down with a patient. I would ask them if they've had any AEs or SAEs, any illnesses, injuries, sicknesses, doctor's visits, anything. And they'd be like, nope. And then as soon as the PI came in, they had a long list of things. And I was like, man, I just asked you that. Why are you telling them? I don't understand.
Oh, that has definitely happened more times than I would care to admit.
But I think, again, that's something that can be mitigated by developing that relationship. And now it happens all the time. I mean, it's a double-edged sword, but I give my patients my cell phone number, and sometimes they call. Sometimes they call me at 11 o'clock for something that's got nothing to do with anything. But on the other hand, we've build a relationship a lot more easily, and therefore I know what's going on. If they're not going to flake out and no show at a visit, they're going to tell me if they're having nausea or diarrhea or something like that, something that they otherwise might not be comfortable telling you if it's just a transactional relationship versus a real relationship where both of your goals are to help them get better.
Sure. And I do think the more I do it, obviously it hasn't been too terribly long in the grand scheme of things, but the more I have kind of realized it's a pretty fine line trying to, because you spend a decent amount of time with the patients, depending on what the study is, talking about relatively personal things, their health and everything going on with them. It's kind of a fine line you have to walk between, being their coordinator or being their treating physician if you're the PI, and being their friend. Because if you spend that much time with someone and talk about, what you end up having to talk about with the patient, their health, and whatever else is going on in their life, you do end up developing some sort of, bond, whether that's friendship or otherwise.
Sure.
And I've had to remind myself, this guy's great. I talk to him, every other day, depending on what the study is, and I think we're pretty good friends. But we're also, it's a very professional setting, and you just kind of have to maintain that boundary a little bit.
Sure, yeah, no, it's a fair point. It is a fine line. I mean, pretty soon, I know about every grandkid that my patient has and what they're all doing with their lives, and that is a great thing. And I don't think that necessarily muddies the water or biases
not at
the
all.
data or anything along those lines. And in fact, again, I think that it can be useful to, again, keeping them in the study and for them to open up a little more to you. But yeah, it can also turn into a 1 hour visit can turn into a 2 hour visit real fast if you don't watch that a little bit.
Yep. Oh, I totally agree.
Moving on, are there any sort of tips, tools, or resources that you use that, again, anything you would like to share with the community? Something that, whether it's a book or a process or a piece of software or something along those lines?
I could think of three kind of off the top of my head, and two of them kind of go hand in hand. One of them's a process that, I call it in my head maintenance routines. Just little things that you have to do daily just to stay on top of everything, whether that's for the sponsor or patient care or whatever it may be. I have a to-do list, which is kind of the second system that I would definitely recommend. You kind of have to have some sort of to-do list in order to do the job effectively, I would say. But it's got to be something, that's easy to use, makes sense to you, and you can see pretty much whenever you need to.
Sure.
Microsoft Outlook's got a great one that I use. The tasks, you can tag it with different colors for different sponsors, or look back at what you completed on what day if you're trying to remember something. But you can build in, repeating tasks within there that you can, once you check them off for one day, they just pop right up the next morning for you.
Sure.
So, clearing your emails, checking EDC for queries, checking labs, checking diaries to make sure everyone's compliant, checking folders for signatures from PIs or sub-Is, and trying to get everything out there on time. Just being able to do those little 5-minute tasks, if you let them all build up, they can take quite a long time at the end of the day or the week to finish. And maybe then you're not getting in everything as timely as you probably would want to. But if it takes 5 minutes, just do it. Something one of my coaches in high school used to tell me, which kind of stuck with me ever since then.
Yeah, I think that's an old, if I believe, the book Getting Things Done, I believe, was one that I read, that if it takes less than 5 minutes, do it now. And it took me a while to learn that too, because that stuff can get away from you real fast. And what you don't want is, your monitor's coming tomorrow, and you're like, oh crap! All right, I got to get all this stuff together. And again, something I've been guilty of far too many times in my career. But yes, using a to-do list, and there's so many different tools out there to do that now. I'm more of a Google person. I use, Google Tasks.
Sure.
I use Asana, which is a nice sort of project management tool. I was gonna say,
I'm a big fan of Notion. I don't know if you've heard of that one.
I don't think I've heard of that one.
Or from our personal, just kind of
to check that out.
Life, but it's kind of a mix of Asana, Things, 3, or Todoist.
Okay.
Kind of been. I don't know. Everyone who seems to try seems to turn into kind of like a cult favorite, and I've definitely drank the Kool-Aid on that one. So
Right.
Highly recommend it if you're looking for something to try out.
Nice. Yeah, I'll definitely have to check that out. Our team uses Slack to communicate, so I've tried to find something that's integrates really easily. I did notice that Asana did. I'll have to check out Notion and see. Well, very good. Anything else you want to add?
No, just been great talking to you. It's pretty fun to get different aspects or different viewpoints on the job with different locations around the country and different experiences.
Yeah, I mean, I think we do. We all come from such different places, not just, geographically and, in our way that we do what we do. So that's a lot of reason, again, why I started this. It's every conversation I have, I learned something new. I think this is a way to sort of share that with the broader clinical research community. And I think that's sort of sorely lacking. I've got a lot of other ideas in the future of, things I want to share. I want to talk about, I want to do like a CTMS showdown. I want to compare all the different tools that are out there.
That would be very cool. We're trying out a few ones at our site, trying to move more towards e-regulatory and e-source and all of that, just since, especially with COVID, that's definitely seems to be the way everything's moving.
Yeah.
And it's been very fun trying out a few different ones, ones we've worked with in the past that are rolling out new implementations and brand new ones too. So
yeah, it's definitely driven the technology, the pandemic has, but for me, I've tried a few throughout the years, and I know there's more out there. I think it can be tricky to really compare. And so again, it's one of those things that you don't know how well it works for you until you start using it. And by then it's, it could be too late. You could be stuck in the contract for 2 years. And you're like,
then you bought it for a year or two.
You're like, well, I wish I had tried this other one instead. So I think I'd love to be able to get buy-in from the community and their opinions on the ones that they've used. So again, that's just an extension of the whole idea of hearing from everybody and sharing those experiences. And I think hopefully this is something that is, valuable to people at sites,
No, I definitely agree with that.
Where can people find you online?
Just at LinkedIn, John Bowman. I don't think I have a special link or anything like that. And then just coastalcarolinaresearch.com. If you're in the Charleston area, we'd definitely love to see if we can help you out.
Very good. So I will link your LinkedIn and a link there to in the show notes, so people can reach out to you. And thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. And until next time, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Please make sure to check us out at notetofilepodcast.com for full episode transcriptions, links to any resources mentioned in the show, as well as the guest contact information. Once again, thanks for listening.